Diddy's birthday this year was a behind-bars birthday. Diddy, the guy once famous for throwing the kind of legendary parties that made Hollywood blush, just celebrated his 55th birthday in New York's most notorious jail. You got to love life's twists. Could these shock ing videos be the final nail in Diddy's case? Happy birthday to me. Instead of the lavish all-white designer-clad shindigs he's famous for, the ones packed with celebrities, absurd amounts of champagne, and a parade of A-list egos, the birthday setting this year featured prison walls, guards, and probably a very uninspired slice of birthday cake.
I'm like, cool, I'm trying to be inside.
You can almost hear the echo of the birthday song bouncing off those concrete walls. He's still Diddy, though, right? His kids dialed in to wish him well, 6 out of the 7 of them singing an off-key version of Happy Birthday. Not quite the glitz and glamour of yesteryears, but it's the thought that counts. Everybody a shot. Oh, how times have changed. Remember those white parties, the ones where practically every celeb from the early 2000s stumbled in fresh out of a private jet to sip crystal clear vodka while rubbing shoulders with the hottest names in the business? It was a surreal cocktail of fame, fortune, and fashion, and let's not forget the private parties. Rumors about what went on during those events, the ones beyond the media's prying eyes, were legendary. It's hard to think back on those stories without a smirk. What happens in Diddy's mansion apparently doesn't stay there, especially when federal investigators are involved.
So you're not gonna have another level.
She's literally digging her face in it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to buy you a new one. Yo, she's face down in the cake right now.
This year, instead of champagne and poolside cabanas, he got the fine culinary experience that jail offers, reportedly some kind of cold sandwich and maybe a side of was it even cooked vegetables, an absolute far cry from the days when his parties had sushi flown in from Tokyo or truffle pastas served at 3 a.m. to a dance floor full of models. This year that luxurious vibe got swapped out for some questionable jailhouse grub, no caviar, no chilled crystal, just some bread, some mystery meat, and maybe some powdered juice. And the location, well, it wasn't his palatial estate or a sprawling beach house, nope, instead it was the Metropolitan Detention Center, a place notorious for being barely habitable. It's a place where the toilets freeze in winter, the heat is non-existent, and the food's so bad that even someone as famous as Sam Bankman-Fried complained about it. Who would have thought that the guy whose parties once inspired an entire genre of reality TV would end up battling boredom in a crowded jail cell trying to get comfortable on a prison mattress as thick as a slice of toast? Life comes at you fast.
An investigation is underway into an inmate death. Bernalillo County says an inmate at MDC died yesterday. UNMH hospital medical team responded to an emergency at the facility and tried to save the inmate until Albuquerque ambulance and Bernalillo County Fire and Rescue had arrived.
You almost have to laugh when you think about the STK contrast. There's Diddy, who once couldn't throw a party without Leonardo DiCaprio, Jay-Z, and Naomi Campbell in attendance, now just glad to hear his kids sing over a staticky jail phone. Honestly, if the kids had tried to light a candle for him, the prison guards probably would have taken it as a security breach. The man who had his birthday fireworks visible from miles away had to settle for some fluorescent flickering overhead lights this time around. What's got him here, you ask? Oh, just a small matter of intimate trafficking and racketeering charges. Pretty serious booziness, those infamous private parties we mentioned earlier. Turns out they weren't all about champagne and vibes. Federal prosecutors argue that Diddy used his wealth and influence to coerce people into what they're calling freak-offs. Let's just say it wasn't exactly a game of Twister. Allegedly, these events involved cameras, substances, a whole lot of lubricant, and plenty of people who weren't necessarily there out of choice, not quite the kind of after-party you see on social media unless it's the kind that ends in a courtroom now. Diddy's legal team claims it was all consensual, just a bit wild, maybe a little weird, but consensual. They're putting on quite the defense, painting these sessions as some kind of 2000s throwback of extreme party culture where everyone knew what they were getting into, but not everyone's buying that. A witness has already testified that things weren't as fun and carefree as they appeared. One witness even described turning up expecting a full-blown party and finding only Diddy in a robe, champagne flute in hand, waiting for something else, the kind of awkwardness that a quick Uber escape doesn't really fix, especially if you're miles from home. But it's not just intimate trafficking. The man's facing racketeering charges too. Allegedly, he used Bad Boy Entertainment to run a whole criminal enterprise from kidnapping to forced labor. It's the kind of rap sheet that's as long as the guest list for one of his classic parties. Add to that potential new charges coming down the line, more witnesses are talking, grand juries are gathering. It's all starting to look like this birthday behind bars might not be his last, even in this bleak birthday setting, though Diddy seemed almost cheerful about the call from his kids, the "I'll see you in a couple of days," the whole "I've got the best family" spiel. You can almost picture it right. A guy who's accustomed to getting whatever he wants whenever he wants suddenly finding comfort in a simple phone call from his kids. Maybe prison's changed him, or maybe he's just holding on to whatever shreds of optimism are left. The kids have like an hour left, so get extra comfortable, cause this thing turns into something that when y'all get older, y'all come to. Meanwhile, his defense team is scrambling, trying to get him out on bail, arguing that Diddy's not a flight risk. I mean, how far can you get when you're one of the most recognizable faces in pop culture, but the judge isn't buying it? No bail, no house arrest, just sit tight Mr. Combs and enjoy the view or lack thereof from the Metropolitan Detention Center. It's safe to say his next birthday might be looking pretty similar, and that, my friends, is where we're at. The man who once danced in million-dollar music videos, flaunted his yachts, and wore custom-made silk robes is now making do with metal bunk beds and no privacy. There's irony in that, no doubt about it. In the end, even the people who seem untouchable have to answer for their actions. Maybe the next time you hear about a crazy Diddy party, it'll be a very different kind of celebration, one that takes place after a courtroom victory or defeat. Let's dig a little deeper into the old days. You remember the lavish party in the Hamptons, the one where guests had to wear all white, no exceptions, the kind of exclusive event that made regular parties look like kids' birthdays. Gathering helicopters overhead, paparazzi camped out for miles, and the finest of everything catered for people who seemingly had everything that was Diddy's domain, a place where the party didn't even start until the sun came up. It's funny to think back on those extravagant nights now, considering the only thing rising in the Metropolitan Detention Center is the number of complaints about the temperature. People love to speculate what went on at those wild parties behind closed doors, and let's not pretend Diddy didn't enjoy cultivating the mystique. He was the king of keeping people guessing, dropping hints about private events that were rumored to be way more outrageous than the already lavish public affairs. But those freak-offs that the authorities are talking about now, that's a whole different level of scandal. If what prosecutors say is true, Diddy's private gatherings might have been less about opulence and more about manipulation. That legendary charm of his, it could very well have been the tool he used to coerce vulnerable people into situations they didn't sign up for. Imagine the shift from velvet ropes and guest lists to cold metal bars and inmate rosters. It's not the kind of VIP treatment anyone dreams of, but here's the thing, there's still a strange fascination with watching someone who was at the top of the world suddenly fall, and Diddy, who once played the role of the larger-than-life party king, is now facing the consequences of that very lifestyle. The federal agents didn't miss a beat when they raided his properties earlier this year. They found it all: cameras, lubricants, substances, everything that screams no-holds-barred excess, except now that excess is evidence in a criminal trial. Back in the day, if Diddy decided he wanted something, he got it, usually without much resistance, but now the resistance is coming from the legal system, a place where his charm and money are put to the ultimate test, and the prosecution isn't exactly playing nice. They're dragging everything into the light, every witness, every piece of sordid evidence, every whisper from those closed-door parties, all of it. There's no velvet curtain to hide behind now. The grand jury hearings are in full swing, and more than a few people are lining up to testify. They say a federal grand jury has been hearing testimony from witnesses who claim to have tapes of these freak-offs, and we're not just talking about grainy footage from a phone camera. Apparently these are tapes that might even involve other celebrities, including some minors. It's the kind of bombshell that could turn an already explosive case into a full-on nuclear event. His defense team must be scrambling behind the scenes. How do you argue against something that potentially damning? They're holding to their line that everything was consensual, but that narrative starts to crumble if these new tapes show otherwise, and if minors are involved, well then Diddy's in a whole new realm of legal trouble. Consent isn't a valid defense when you're dealing with children, and even the best lawyers can't argue that one away. But let's step back for a moment and think about the sheer absurdity of it all. This is a man who not too long ago had the entire world at his feet. He was launching successful business ventures, signing multi-million-dollar deals, and rubbing elbows with the world's elite. Yet despite all the wealth, despite all the power, here he is locked up in a notorious detention center eating cold sandwiches and listening to his kids sing him happy birthday over a jail phone. It's almost poetic in a twisted way. Diddy's family, bless them, has been standing by him throughout this ordeal. His kids have posted messages of support on social media, and they've been visiting him in jail. It's probably one of the few bright spots he has these days. His eldest son, Quincy, even posted a message defending his father, calling out what he says are conspiracy theories and false narratives. It's hard not to feel for them. Imagine watching your dad, someone who was once larger than life, now reduced to a shadow of himself, caught in a legal battle that's playing out on the public stage. But even with all the support from his family, Diddy's reality now is stark. He's not in control anymore. He's subject to the same rules as every other inmate in the Metropolitan Detention Center. The same bad food, the same cramped quarters, the same sense of helplessness. There's no VIP section here, no special treatment, and the reality of that must be setting in. It's also worth mentioning just how notorious the MDC is. The conditions are so bad that even judges have refused to send people there. It's a place where the heat barely works in the winter, where fights break out regularly, and where people are desperate to get out. It's about as far from a luxury lifestyle as you can get, and yet this is where Diddy finds himself. The sweep of the jail that took place recently, the one where they found substances, homemade weapons, and electronic devices, only adds to the grim picture. It's not a safe place, not by any stretch, and for someone like Diddy, who's used to controlling his environment down to the tiniest detail, that must be a special kind of nightmare. His attorneys are doing everything they can to get him out on bail, but the judge isn't having it. The prosecution has painted Diddy as a flight risk and a danger to the community, and they're not backing down. No amount of celebrity or wealth is getting him out of this one. It's a stark reminder that at the end of the day, the law is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how many number one hits you have or how many businesses you've launched. If you break the law, you have to face the consequences. As we look ahead, there's no telling what's going to happen next. The grand jury is still hearing evidence, and there could be new charges coming down the line. If that happens, Diddy's trial will likely be pushed back, meaning more time behind bars, more birthdays spent in jail, and more distance from the life he once knew. It's a long fall from the top, and Diddy is living that fall right now. The man who once seemed untouchable is now at the mercy of the legal system, and there's no telling how it will all end. One thing is for sure, though, this is not the kind of story anyone could have imagined for him. From the glitz and glamour of his prime to the cold, harsh reality of a jail cell, it's a tale of excess, downfall, and the ultimate reckoning, and maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder that no one is above the law. Diddy's white parties, that old-school sparkling facade, everyone and their dog wanted an invite. A-listers like Leonardo DiCaprio, J-Lo, and Ashton Kutcher came out dressed head to toe in pure white, as if showing up to a sanctimonious summer gathering. White symbolizing purity, unity, innocence. Sure, buddy, if you squint hard enough and don't look behind the curtain, lavish locations in the Hamptons and St. Tropez set the stage with gourmet dishes and a guest list curated to perfection. It was like being part of an elite cult, except the Kool-Aid tasted like $200 champagne. But as it turns out, behind all the white linen and immaculate smiles were secrets a lot less pristine.
Oh, he's bad boy now. It's your icon alert. It's called He's Bad Boy Now. It's called Don't Ever Play Yourself.
As if the staged white dress spectacle wasn't enough, enter the alleged secret parties, the so-called freak-off sessions. Unlike the glamorous, public-facing white parties, these were reportedly much darker and a lot more clandestine. This wasn't about velvet ropes and selfies with Ashton Kutcher. It was more about secrecy, manipulation, and the weird, charged atmosphere of power and coercion. Reports suggest that Diddy meticulously orchestrated these underground gatherings like an elaborate chess game. Every pawn moved in service of his own desires. The lines between fun and coercion, between luxury and hedonism, blurred to the point where it became just a big, uncomfortable mess. There was no end to indulgence. No limits respected. Let's talk logistics. Those black SUVs transporting young models to these saris, many reportedly having zero idea about what they were walking into. Former model Precious M's testimony tells it like it is. VIP promises reassurances. Just show up, and everything will be taken care of, and suddenly you're in an unfamiliar place feeling like you've been hunted. It doesn't sound like your typical party, does it? This was no ordinary celebrity bash. This was something straight out of a paranoid conspiracy thriller. Then there's the alleged surveillance, hidden cameras planted in private rooms recording encounters without consent, turning people into unwilling participants in their own blackmail stories. Some call it leverage, others call it a hostage situation with prettier outfits. Call it what you want. The result was the same: fear, silence, compliance. The very people drawn in by glitz were left with the reality of being fodder for manipulation. You may be wondering where all those high-profile celebs we saw cheesing it up at these parties were. Ashton Kutcher, for one, danced around the subject in an old interview. His words, or rather his lack of them, "I've got a lot I can't tell," which spoke volumes in Hollywood. Not saying something can be louder than spilling the beans. It makes you wonder just how much they knew. Were these celebrities innocent bystanders? Blinded by the bling, or did they have a decent enough clue about what went on behind those closed doors? Hard to tell, and in the world of Hollywood secrets, the truth is usually buried under layers of NDAs, close friend testimonies, and carefully constructed PR statements. September 2024. Cue the cuffs. Diddy the mogul, who sold himself as the very definition of "I'm winning at life," was finally arrested. Charges included intimate trafficking, racketeering, and transporting people for prostitution. The court documents didn't mince words, a pattern of manipulation, exploitation, and coercion, all wrapped up in a neat bow labeled power trip. The investigation revealed damning evidence, tapes, testimonies, and accounts from people whose lives were shattered. The public, the fans, the very audience that had cheered for him at the BET Awards, had to reconcile the image of the suave entrepreneur with this much darker version of the man. Social media went into overdrive, half of it disbelief and the other half a weary we knew something was off. People wanted answers. Justice and above all accountability. Diddy isn't the only one on trial here. It's the entire industry that seems to protect, enable, and reward this kind of behavior. It's a toxic culture dressed up in designer clothes, fueled by power trips, coercion, and the notion that money and influence can keep anything under wraps. But this case forced Hollywood to stare into the mirror, and the reflection wasn't flattering. People started asking uncomfortable questions. How much did others know? Who else was in on it? How has an entire industry been able to operate for so long under a shroud of protection for its rich, powerful men? No one wants to rock the boat when that boat's sailing on seas of cash, exclusive invites, and career-making opportunities. But as more victims stepped forward, the illusion shattered. Those golden gates, so carefully guarded, seemed less golden and more like rusted bars of a gilded cage. Suddenly everyone was talking about ethics, about how to protect individuals from exploitation, and about whether the entertainment industry was ready for a long overdue reboot. When we talk about birthdays, we think of cake, good times, and maybe a few embarrassing stories, but for some of hip-hop's big names, these supposedly happy occasions have taken dark, bizarre, or downright shocking turns. Let's dive into some real-life examples where these high-profile celebrations ended up being anything but picture perfect. Starting with Diddy's unforgettable stint in jail. Most of us know Sean Diddy Combs for his all-out, no-expense-spared parties that put the rest of us mere mortals to shame. Golden champagne. A-list celebrities design everything. That's Diddy's usual vibe, but when he hit the big 55 on November 4, 2024, the celebration was a little muted, to put it mildly. Forget the red carpets and the exclusive guest lists. Diddy spent his birthday at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where there was nothing even close to his usual lobster dinners or expensive tequila. Instead, he had the pleasure of chowing down on standard prison fare. Why? Well, it turns out that even if you're a mega-rich music mogul, legal troubles, in this case a whole cocktail of charges including intimate trafficking and racketeering, can still rain on your parade. Let's be real, there's no way to put a positive spin on spending a milestone birthday in jail, especially when your usual celebrations cost more than the average person's entire net worth. It's a stark reminder that nobody, not even the titans of the music industry, is immune to the consequences of their actions. And yet, despite the orangey jumpsuit, Diddy's fans were left in a state of shock as videos of his celebration in a cold, drab cell started leaking out. Seeing him shuffle around behind bars, instead of mingling with Hollywood elites, was, well, let's just say, quite the contrast. Next up, we've got Julio Fulio, a rapper from Jacksonville who had a birthday that ended about as far from joyously as you can imagine. June 21, 2024, started out all good. Fulio, real name Charles Jones, threw a pool party at an Airbnb in Tampa, the kind of party that you can practically feel through your screen when you see the Instagram posts. Crowded, rowdy, and the vibe is one of total chaos, which apparently got the attention of the police because they showed up to shut the whole thing down. Now, most of us would call it a night after that. But Fulio? Nope. He and his friends just moved the party to a nearby Holiday Inn, but by early June 23, the party vibe had shifted completely in the hotel parking lot. Things took a dark turn as gunmen opened fire, ambushing Fulio and his entourage. It ended in bloodshed. Fulio didn't make it, and 3 others were injured. It's a tragic story, one that's all too familiar in the world of rap celebrity fame and the ever-present danger that seems to shadow some of these rising stars. You'd think after so many of these stories, people might start taking security seriously at these kinds of events, but apparently not. Now for something less deadly but definitely awkward. Master P's birthday surprise back in April 20th. A flash mob organized just for him started dancing right there in the middle of Santa Monica while he was enjoying dinner with his son Romeo. This should have been the heartwarming Instagram perfect birthday moment, you know, the type where everyone cries happy tears and it goes viral. But nope, Master P wasn't having it. Instead of joining in or at least cracking a smile, he looked completely over it and just left. Ouch, it's a classic case of good intentions meeting terrible execution. Some people just don't want to be the center of attention, especially not in a surprise dance party while they're trying to eat in peace. Not every grand gesture works, and sometimes the best gift is just letting someone enjoy their birthday without turning it into a public spectacle. Then there's Drake, who decided that his 38th birthday in Houston on October 24th, 2024 was the perfect time to air out some dirty laundry, specifically his beef with Ludacris turns out the root of their rivalry was something pretty relatable. Ludacris had dated Drake's first girlfriend, and that's right, all those diss tracks, all the tension, it all came down to one girl. Cue the collective eye roll. Drake's party went from a celebration to an impromptu therapy session, and honestly, who can blame him? We've all had those birthday moments where a few drinks in, suddenly you're telling everyone that one story about your ex that you really should have kept to yourself. It's messy, it's petty, and it's just so perfectly Drake. And we've got Landon Barker, Travis Barker's kid, who got himself into some hot water over a Diddy-themed party he attended. Apparently some folks thought he had hosted it, and considering Diddy's less than glamorous situation at the time, it's not exactly the kind of party you'd want your name associated with. But Landon cleared things up quickly. He just ended up at the party after dinner with friends, totally unaware of the theme until he was already there. It's a classic case of wrong place, wrong time. It just goes to show how fast things can spiral out of control when you're in the public eye. One minute you're having a chill night out, and the next you're caught up in some weird controversy. Why? Just because you didn't read the invite closely enough. And honestly, who does? Do you think Diddy's legal troubles are a case of karma or just the world's most intense birthday surprise gone wrong? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more.